Hi, everybody. How's it going? Thumbs up if you're good. Thumbs down if you're not good. Thumbs to the side if you're just whatever. Right on. Or if you're like a gladiator ready to assassinate somebody. You guys, my name is Jason. If I don't know you, I've been here a number of times. I do consider myself part of this community, but I often have to work on weekends. So it's Easter tomorrow, right? It's crazy. Like, my perspective on what Easter is has shifted so much over the 26 years that I've been alive. And I was thinking most recently that, like, you know, how does it apply to my life right now? And if I'm pulling from Scripture, from biblical Scripture, I look at that verse that says, like, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? When there's, like, we talk about this theme of resurrection, and it's sort of this transformation, this metamorphosis. Like if you've ever seen the movie Kung Fu Hustle, when the guy's in the cast and he comes out and starts kicking all this ninja ass, right? So basically, like, I'm trying to be a little more like meditative and contemplative and attempting to like care for my mental health so that I would undergo this sort of like modern resurrection within my own life. And so I lent Tony a book called Zen and the Art of Happiness, right? And in this book, he's talking about how sometimes when we're falling apart, when we feel dead, like we're buried in whatever kind of metaphorical tomb, right? That one of the best things we can do is start to convince our brain that things aren't so bad, right? Which sometimes can feel a little fake, right? If you're like, yeah, I'm happy, right? Life is good. But there's actual, neurological science that shows if you start to smile, if you start to write down things you're grateful for, that your brain chemistry will slowly start to change and you can experience a renewing of your mind, a modern day resurrection, so to speak. So there's a song that I absolutely love, which was written by Charlie Chaplin, right? Nat King Cole made it really, really famous in the 40s and 50s, and it's called Smile. So if you know it, sing it. If you don't, do whatever the heck you want. Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use in crying? And you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. So there's that sort of dichotomy between like being realistic, right, and being honest, but also starting to have this sort of discipline of gratitude, of renewing our minds. So things like what we read in biblical scripture that was written like 3,000 years ago, where it says things like, be still and know that I am God, right? To really let those wandering, crazy thoughts slow down and remind ourselves that we're part of something bigger and that life is still worthwhile. If you smile, through your fear and sorrow. Smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. All right, good song, Charlie Chaplin.
Dude, thank you. Oh. How's everybody doing? Good? Yeah? Good. We're gonna... Oh, that's gonna be awkward, isn't it? Jason, are you like 8 feet tall? Yeah. 8 feet. Happy Easter. Yeah? Happy Easter. This is one of the first times again, Easter weekend, typically when I was pastoring at a larger church, Easter weekend was chaotic, and most people who were like serving hated life, and so you would have like people making all this food and grumbling in the background. But then you'd also have people really excited about the play or this or that. This time around, it just feels nice and relaxed. Half of us are already at the park right now, so we're going to have a smaller group. Is that cool? Yeah, so this is going to be nice, actually, really chill. So I want to talk about Easter, and I want to start by asking you, just to, since we're small, maybe let's do this. What was your opinion, your perspective on Easter when you were little? Like, what did it look like for you? Or maybe you have no, like, Easter. I didn't even celebrate that. Like, I didn't know what Easter was. Tell me real quick. Or maybe, turn to the people around you. Just someone next to you. What's been your experience, your history with Easter? Easter weekend or Easter Sunday, whatever it is. Go for it. Oh, there's music in the background. Just go for it. Finally got one.
I'll tell you about it. It was such a fun experience.
I heard a lot of like Easter eggs, plays, that kind of stuff. When Easter weekend for me, it was kind of a mixture of terrified horror and super excitement. That was my experience. And here's why I say terrified horror to start with. I knew that at church I was going to watch someone murdered. I knew that I was going to watch like the brutal murder of this Jewish guy, and who I was beginning to be familiar with as Jesus. But I was going to watch him brutally murdered, and then we were going to do this thing where we would pass around plates, and people would drink juice and eat crackers, and everyone kind of had like this guilt feeling because we just watched a murder, right? Then you'd watch that, and then afterwards they'd have the play go, and you'd see a resurrection. The stone would be pushed away, and then everyone would be really happy. And then I was promised that some point in time I would get to go to heaven. And I remember thinking, boy, this is such a weird, I just saw like death, and then I saw resurrection. I don't know how to feel about this. Oh, weird. But then I knew Sunday was coming, though, because Sunday for me meant Easter eggs. And so all week long we'd been making Easter eggs. And so I knew that our family was going to get together and we were going to hide Easter eggs. And so one of the few days, except for Blessed Halloween, right, you got tons of candy. Those two holidays were like the holidays for a kid. You got to have candy. And it didn't matter if it came from a stranger or in an egg, you got candy, right? Like, good day. Oh, sure, yeah, the pagan thing. Danielle, you know all about that. Yeah, Danielle couldn't even like celebrate Christmas though, so she like one-ups you. Yeah, it was all pagan. So good point. Pagan, right? We've heard the pagan thing. Easter is filled with like a lot of different connections to a lot of different cultural backgrounds you may not even have known. And so we'll even delve into that a little bit. But I wanna reshape Easter a little bit today, the discussion we're gonna have, because Easter shouldn't be a day, or at least for me, as I've kind of evolved as a person, I don't look at Easter anymore as a day that like I celebrate the death of someone, or the idea that someday I might get a golden ticket if I'm good enough. Easter for me has actually become something really vibrant and something I've learned to slowly begin to live. Did I interest you? Is that a good like segue? Yeah, sweet. So I want to talk about new life. I want to talk about new life today, and I'm going to kind of weave it together with some thoughts about what Easter weekend looked like for people all across the globe, and then different ways in which we can actually apply it today. So let me go through this first. How many of you know what this is? How many of you saw this? What feelings kind of came up for you when you saw this Notre Dame building, right? This church burning. 850-year-old building in France that has, again, it's a historic building. So much tourism goes through there. What did it feel like for you to see this historic building, this monument, basically, in France, burning? What was that? Sadness, okay.
Where they're commissioned by the Allied forces in World War II to go and save all the art before it gets bombed by the Germans. Right. And they say things like if these countries have to rebuild after the war, they need to at least know where they came from, right? Know their art and their culture and their history. Nice. So my heart broke for the French people, Europe, and civilization as a whole, because 800 years of art history, and that's why.
And I heard a lot of art was destroyed.
The bees were saved, though. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
They farmed honey in the roof, and all the bees lived.
Nature finds a way. Yeah, that's good.
Park.
Yeah, that's right. Nature finds a way. Yeah. It was really sad. I was at the gym and I was watching this, and it was interesting to me as I will find every excuse not to work out when I'm at the gym, but the TV's up and I'm watching, and there's a crowd of people all gathering, and most of us, I would guess probably half of us had never even been to France, but that building meant something to us. And there was like a deep sadness when we were watching the thing burning, this roof of this building burning. And so as I'm watching it, I heard something really interesting. French President Emmanuel Macron says, "The fire was a terrible tragedy, but we will rebuild this cathedral together." Isn't that beautiful? We, the people, will rebuild together. It's a tragedy. Tragedies happen, but we as a people are going to come together and we're going to rebuild. And it got me thinking, that's kind of a beautiful promise, isn't it? Like in the middle of your pain, in the middle of brokenness, in the middle of tragedy, that promise that there is new life just around the corner, that's a really spiritual idea. And here's the cool thing for me. Easter, that sounds weird to say cool, but in 70 AD, the Jews lost their historic building. In 70 AD, their temple was burned and destroyed, not a brick left standing. And here's the weird thing about this. For them, when their building collapses, their question was, will the Jewish nation survive? In Paris, they weren't saying this, are we going to survive this? Like, will we as a nation survive this thing? Why do you think that is? They didn't say that. Okay, the nation is not the building. But back then in that era, the nation was the building. And if you're a Jew, your temple, everything spiritual, everything revolves around that temple. That's where God is. And when the temple is destroyed, everything is destroyed. And so for them, like imagine us feeling that way about Notre Dame. They were feeling that like 1,000 times worse. And that's after the collapse, the destruction, after watching thousands and thousands of their people murdered, the Jesus story begins to circulate. That's 40 plus years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, right? It's 40 years after. But the story picks up and it's beginning to be told after that. Any questions or comments on that? Interesting? Why do you suppose the story of Jesus would be helpful for people who just lost everything? It's not rhetorical. You can answer if you want. Okay, good. Story of rebirth. You said something a second ago. Paris is not a building. It's the people. You guys remember that weird thing that we would do, like the steeple, and there are all the people? I can't even do it. I don't remember how to do it. But yeah, they were reminded through Jesus that we are not a building, we're a people. And we can rebuild buildings, and we can rebuild lives. New birth is waiting just around the corner. That was the beauty of it. And that's why, again, Jesus says over and over again, destroy this temple, I'll raise it again in 3 days. Did that happen? The temple didn't, right? But there's something bigger here. The person of Jesus, he's saying, you and I, we rebuild. We are the walking, living, breathing temples everywhere we go. We are where spirituality happens, where goodness happens. Kind of cool, right? So here's what I want to do with this. What if there was no death in our world? What do you suppose would happen if, like, some of us got our way and nothing ever died? What would the world look like? No death. Okay. Yeah, good. It would be hugely overpopulated, which is already an issue, right? And I'll touch on that. What else? No one ever dies. Okay, good. Yeah. More people, more suffering. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, no sense. Why would I want to change the world? I'm going to live forever. Yeah. Okay, good. Let me show you scientifically some interesting things that would happen if there was no death in the world, if nothing ever died. So here we go. One writer says this about forest fires. How many of you remember the bear that would oftentimes say, "You too can prevent a forest fire"? Smokey, good. I remember growing up thinking, fire's bad. Forest fires are really bad. We need to prevent them. But the truth is, nature has this way of, like, literally burning forests down in order to rebuild again. Fires are actually a very good thing. And so, interesting, forest fires are essential in the natural cycle of woods growth and replenishment. They clear dead trees, leaves, competing vegetation. You guys can read the rest. They break down and return nutrients to the soil. Without fires, forests become overgrown and tinder boxes. Fires are really important. And this is why often today we'll hear about these huge, massive fires, because we have tried to stop fires. When the reality is sometimes if we had let nature do its thing, fires would have done their thing and helped rebuild, and we wouldn't have a tree every inch connected to another tree and overpopulation in a forest. Forests need to experience death in order to be healthy. Let me keep showing you more. What about animals? Cassandra Mayer says this: when animal overpopulation occurs, it creates an imbalance. Again, we've seen this over and over again with different populations. That's why oftentimes, different areas will bring in wolves, or they'll bring in certain species because they need to basically kill some of the overpopulated animals. And many of us, we don't like that, do we? We're like, you can't kill Bambi. Well, the wolf needs to eat Bambi. That's part of life. No, I saw the movie. No. Let me give you more. Overpopulation wreaks havoc on ecosystems in hundreds of ways. From disease spreading, weaker animals dominating gene pools, waterways affected, the list goes on. Nature needs to be allowed to give and take away life naturally. How did that land for you to read that? Anyone just fighting this right now? No. You're pretty okay with that? Okay. Why is it that most of us are okay with it happening in nature? Like seeing death in nature. But when it comes to us, we're like, oh, hell no. Like, die? No. Death? No. No. Why is that? We can be okay with like Bambi eaten by a wolf. But when it comes to my own demise someday, why is it that I freak out so much?
Like we look at a wolf eating a deer and we're like, well, it served its ecological purpose.
Okay, good.
For us, we're like, what about my higher purpose?
Yeah, meaning. We're meaning-making machines, aren't we? Everything has to have a meaning. All right, interesting. Why else might we fight against these natural things so much as humans? Fear. Okay, good. Fear. Anyone want to delve deeper into that? What is scary about death to you?
Suffering, or what you leave behind, or if you lose someone, just the sense of loss.
Okay, good. Yeah, loss, fear. Good. Now that I've got you very depressed. Let me share with you. Overpopulation, I'm just going to read this because that's a huge thing right there to read. Overpopulation is an issue, isn't it? Right now in our culture, we are experiencing this and there's not enough to go around. Very broad statement there. There's just not. And so let me read this one comment because, again, that's super long. For one, overpopulation is an issue. There are about 7,601,164,000 people alive right now, and about 360,000 people are born every day. Assuming that is a constant figure, 97,200,000,000 people are pregnant and will give birth in the next 9 months. Sorry, 97 million, yeah, not billion. Thank you. Presuming deathlessness began right away, it might take a while for people to realize it, maybe a month. Again, that statistic's a little scary, isn't it? We are overpopulating the world. Now, let me throw this on you. If no one ever died, what would it look like then? Like, we would be living on top of each other. Like, literally, there would not be enough room to walk. It would just be insane. Death is a natural part of life, and we went through a little bit of this. Tons of effects of overpopulation. So here's why I say all of that. We are part of a cycle of life, every single one of us. And oftentimes we fight it, but it is a very natural thing to be a part of this cycle. Whether you're an animal, a plant, a person, we all go through these cycles. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, all of these are cycles that we all go through. And yet when we seem to fight against spring, or when we fight against autumn going into winter, it's a very awkward fight because you're going to lose, aren't you? No matter how long you keep that Christmas tree in your house after Christmas, it's going to get gross at some point. The needles will not stay, will they? Unless, of course, you have a fake one, and then you're just a weirdo. Fighting it is destructive. Death, though, creates something interesting. It creates really fertile soil for new life to begin again. Why is it that when you get soil, you want the soil that's got like like I grew up with, my grandparents owned a farm, and I remember they would let the cows like run around in the field, and they would take that, and they would say, that's the good stuff. I was like, ugh, like there's poop in there. Yeah, that's the good stuff. Like, why is that good? They'd say, oh, we need all of that to help fertilize the soil, to give it nutrients. And that's the interesting thing about death, is that when death occurs, it actually opens up life for something new. But we don't always want to hear that, but that's the truth. And so I wanted to share with you, for Easter, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different cultures that actually celebrate this concept of life, death, new life again. It's called the spring equinox. So let me show you some interesting things. And this is going to throw you off, and I hope it just messes with you for the rest of the day. Cool? So let me show you some interesting things that other cultures were doing before Christianity began adopting Easter. If you were a Sumerian, some of the oldest cultures in the world, they had Ishtar, who was hung naked on a stake and then resurrected and ascended from the underworld up into the sky. They celebrated this as a metaphor to picture again the beauty of life, death, resurrection, the cycles that all of us go through. If you were an Egyptian, you celebrated Horus. And again, there's this whole story about this damaged eye and the symbol of life and death and rebirth. You celebrated Horus. If you were a part of the Roman Empire, before the 1st century, you actually did something really interesting. And I just want to see how this lands for you. There was this, they called it the Sibyl cult, which was celebrating this goddess Sibyl. And what happened is they would celebrate the death and the rebirth of Sibyl. And here's what would take place. Here's how they'd celebrate it. They had something called Blood Black Friday. And they would celebrate or they wouldn't celebrate, they would actually discuss death as a community, as a culture. And they would actually retell the stories of the death of Sibyl. And then afterwards, they would have Saturday and Sunday, 2 days, in order to begin to crescendo into the celebration of life. On Sunday, they would celebrate the rebirth, the life again that a culture experiences, all connected to spring equinox. Tell me right now, some of you, are you thinking like, what am I doing? You're new here. What's your name again? Allison. Allison's like, what am I doing here? What did you bring me to? How does this land for you reading this? This was pre-Christianity. What is that? How does this land for you hearing this, that this was celebrated? How it was celebrated? Ashlyn's not so happy. She's like, it gives me gas. Did I say Ashland? Oh my goodness, Brooklyn. Yeah, good. We got too many. We're contributing to this overpopulation, apparently.
There's this thing in textual criticism and like those sorts of academic disciplines in history. It's called like synchronicity. That like you take this old legend and then it's brought into a new faith or perspective. And you see that all throughout Scripture, and a lot of churches are afraid to talk about it, but a lot of scholars are talking about it, and it's something that really gets people jaded. They're like, oh, this feels like just a big copy and paste from ancient traditions. And it has a little bit of that feel to it. And it's sort of, I guess, it can either feel like we're disarming this epic story that we grew up with about death and resurrection and being like, oh, it's just a copy and paste from an old tradition. But I have a feeling you're going to lead us to something more than that.
Yeah, of course. It's really interesting when you begin to look historically over all the past ways cultures have celebrated death, resurrection, rebirth. And I would argue just because one looks similar to another should not remove the beauty of the one. I think it only proves more and more that we as humans find the whole cycle really beautiful and compelling. And there is something worth celebrating when you discuss it and you look at life, death, and rebirth again. Am I right? And I'm not talking about incarnational stuff. I'm talking about literally the things that we live with daily. And I'll get into that in a minute. But let me show you some more. What about the bunnies? We got to talk about the bunnies and the eggs, right? That's important. And so, again, where did the Easter eggs come from? If you do a little bit of historical stuff, Christina Gilgrove, historian, she writes, this was basically Istor. This is where we get the word Easter from. And again, it was this northern goddess that they would celebrate. She had the symbol of the rabbit and the hare, and so what they would do is they would basically decorate eggs as gifts to one another, and they were really intricate, beautiful eggs, and they'd give those as gifts to one another. And so you can see how all of the different cultures, they oftentimes meld, and they bring together very similar things together to celebrate certain traditions. And here's what the Jews do. They celebrate life, death, and rebirth. And here's how they do it. They chose to look at Jesus. And let me tell you this, if you are a Muslim, or if you are a Hindu, this story isn't going to be as interesting to you. You're going to have a different story. Am I right? You're going to have a different symbol. For the Jewish people and the early Christian people, Jesus was a symbol that connected really well to this whole concept, especially in a time where you've lost everything. And so think about this, miraculous birth into a really chaotic time, and then death, right? And again, the death was unjust. It was not fair. When you watched the scene as a little kid, you were cringing. I don't even like to bring my kids to those services anymore because I just don't like them seeing it, like in live, like action. I just don't like it. But it's part of life, unfortunately. We don't have to see those murders to know that death happens, right? Whether it's old age or accidents or whatever. But they saw through the picture of Jesus, there is life, there's death, and then there's new life again. There's rebirth. There's the word resurrection, right? We see that in the picture of Jesus. And so the really interesting thing about Jesus is that when you see the whole story of Jesus unfold, it's not that the thing ends. When Jesus, when we're told that he goes up, is the story done? If it was, you wouldn't see churches like meeting today, would you? The idea here is that the movement, it gave birth there with Jesus. To give birth, you have to go through messy, chaotic stuff, don't you? Again, anyone ever experience a birth? There's pain, there's brokenness, there's sadness, there's joy, there's beauty, there's pain, and in the end, you have this little creature coming out, screaming, and that little creature will grow up and become this beautiful, beautiful human being. Life, death, resurrection, birth, all over the place. And that's what Jesus essentially tells us over and over again. His message was, you are the living, breathing temple. Our temple, again, if you're a Jew, your temple was destroyed. The reason the reason that Easter was being celebrated then was for this reason. Your temple was destroyed. What is the message that's going to give us hope again? And here it was. We built a beautiful temple. We built something that was beautiful. We built something that was going to, we thought, last forever. The birth took place, right? And there was beauty, there was goodness, and things happened in that place that were sacred and beautiful. And yet, something happens. It always happens. There's pain, there's death, there's brokenness, there's a fire. What happens afterwards? We rebuild. Anyone getting this? Like the whole reason that the story of Jesus was told was because of this. Our temple's destroyed, our lives are lost. Where's our hope? When you've left Easter weekend, did you leave it feeling hopeful? Or did you feel it leaving like you got to hunt some eggs? What was your feeling typically after an Easter weekend? Just tell me. Like what typical feelings are, say, do they last throughout the week?
80% were negative.
Okay, for you is
Well, just the way I was raised and church I was in,
okay.
they harped on the brokenness a lot. And then, but you're okay at the end.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. The crucifixion scenes took a long time, didn't they? Lots and lots put on the crucifixion scene. I remember as a kid, like, so God died to satisfy God, and now you should feel good about that. It was very confusing to me growing up. Yeah, so 80% of it on that. Okay, got it. Anyone else?
I was at a Seder
Seder.
last night, and
Nice.
I would say 95% was all about the blood and all about it was very difficult and exhausting. Even the songs were just very negative, and
Got
then at the end, but he rose.
Okay, got it. All right. Anyone else? Easter. Like when you left that weekend, what would it feel like to you normally?
So I
In the
didn't
past.
get raised, in the church of any type, but later, I always felt very hopeful, very enthusiastic, and it lasted throughout the week.
Nice.
There's a renewal, and hope.
Beautiful.
Resurrection.
You had that feeling of there's new life around the corner.
And that there's what?
New life around the corner.
That's
There's
right now, yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Anyone else? I love that there's both some negative and there's some positive. After that weekend, where was your head?
Carrying around my basket of candy all week.
Okay, good. Yeah. You definitely had the candy. That was positive. Yeah. For these people, again, whichever culture you're in, after the celebration, after they experience life, death, and they talked about resurrection, the new life, that's where the good stuff was. That's what they talked about and they celebrated. There was drinking, there was partying, there was joy, right? There was fullness. And you talked about new life. And as a people, the message was, let's rebuild again. Let's spend the season now rebuilding. Spring is, for a farmer, what do you do in spring? You what?
Plant.
You plant. Yeah. You what?
I thought you harvested in spring.
Fall's typically your harvest. That's right, you're from Southern California. You're in Southern California. We just eat everyone else's produce. Spring is when the new life in the air, and some of the plants that you may have planted earlier are beginning to grow, and there's also new ones you're going to begin planting. You're beginning to celebrate that new life for the rest, for spring and summer. You're going to see new life beginning to just unfold before you. Come on. Anyone there right now, you just went through like a hellacious year? You went through some really difficult stuff. It doesn't feel like you're going to get any kind of break. But you've been slowly planting things. And this is the season that historically other people all around the world are saying this. Get ready. Like, keep your eyes open because you're going to see some things popping up in the ground. You're going to see some new things beginning to grow, and new life is beginning to happen all around you. Hold on. You've stuck with it. Hold on. And you don't do it alone, you do it together. And so for these Jewish people, they do it together. Here's the thing about cathedrals. Cathedrals burn really easily. I was reading this from retired deputy chief. He said this about cathedrals. It's old wood that is dry and burns fast. And there's a lot of wood in that building. Notre Dame's ceiling has been described as a forest thanks to the amount of wood that was used in its construction. Some of it is hundreds of years old and a tinderbox dry. Churches have their own problem, especially large cathedrals, he said. There's a large open air space and there's lots of air to feed the flame with. A lot of combustible stuff in the ceiling, and once the fire's in the ceiling, it's hard to get up there. It could be 300 feet in the air. Here's the thing. Churches, big buildings like that, very old, 800 years old, tinderboxes. But here's the other thing. We are very similar to churches, aren't we? Anyone like carrying some stuff that you may have already outgrown? Anyone carrying some like things that you probably should just let go of? and knowing that if you keep holding on to those things, that things are going to get hot, they're going to get combustible. There's going to be a fire soon. For many of us, certain things have worn away. I know for many people in this room, certain ideas, ideologies, they've kind of worn away. And you don't see it the same, but we hold on to it. The structure's still there. And for some of us, it's going to take a fire. It's going to take some deconstruction. It's going to take some rebuilding. And to rebuild, what do you have to do? You have to break it down. You have to let some things collapse. And when they collapse, here's the thing, being free to say, it's okay. It's okay, because that thing didn't quite serve me anymore. It was actually something that wasn't working for me anymore. It was more of a detriment to me than good. I'm going to let the thing collapse because I know that we will rebuild again, right? Whether that's relationships that have broken down, whether it's ideologies, whether it is job situations, whatever the thing is, sometimes some things have to fall before you can rebuild. And in this Easter season, my hope is that you and I might remember that as things sometimes crumble, there's the hope and the excitement that we get to rebuild. We get to take the thing now. Who knows what Notre Dame is going to look like now? What will they do with this new spire? What will they do with this new ceiling? The sky's the limit. They could make it bigger, better. They could make it exactly the same. Something tells me they won't. They may not use 800-year-old wood, right? They're going to do some different things now with that cathedral. And so here's what I want to leave you with. And there's some packages in front of you. Don't open those yet. At the last song that Jason does, I'm going to take you through something kind of fun. But let me end with this before Jason comes up. Easter. What if Easter, we chose not to get caught up in the crucifixion, or we didn't get caught up in the eggs and the bunny and all those things? What if we said this? What if we said, we accept the seasons that we're in? Whatever seasons it is, life, death, resurrection, whatever seasons we're in, may we learn to embrace the new season fully. And when it's time to rebuild, when it's time to begin seeing all those new sprouts coming up, may we be the kind of people that see it and rejoice over it and actually be a part of it. Yeah? I have this feeling that in this season right now that we're all in, I know so many of you, I have a feeling that we're going to see some really beautiful things individually, but also as a community. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of interesting growth, and sometimes I wonder if we're ready for it. But I'm excited because I get to be a part of seeing all of these sprouts shooting up and being a part of it. Are you ready? Is that a positive message for Easter? Yeah, I think so too. Jason, can you share some music with us before I come up again?
So, Easter is this thing about stuff getting broken down, deconstructed, and then rebuilt with something new. And I know for a lot of us in this room, we've had to do that with our faith in a lot of different chapters of life, where it's like, I thought this is who God was, and then he dies, and then he's resurrected with some new form. Like when Jesus is like walking through walls, it's like he couldn't do that before, you know? Like in the scriptures it talks about, you know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So like I think of when Moses was like, he thought he knew who the God of Israel was. And then when he's talking to him through the burning bush, he says, but when I go to those people, like, who do I tell them that you are? And there's this gnarly response that just blows the lid off of the box and the building of who we think God is. And he says, tell them I am has sent you. I am. And I was just like, okay. When I first realized what the hell that was saying, it was like my eyes just got wide and I was like quiet for like an hour. Because when I start to realize that God is so limitless, idea of God, we're always trying to understand more and more of what it is. And sometimes our old perspective of God has to die and be resurrected into something new. So there's this singer-songwriter named Amanda Cook from Ethos-Church. And what she did is she went to this house in the middle of nowhere for 2 weeks. There's a news article that says, worship leader goes to house for 2 weeks, rents a mattress on Amazon, and comes out with album. It's like, why did you include the Amazon detail? That's kind of weird. But she talks about in this article how this album actually changed her. And she came out with a fresh perspective of God. And in this song, it's God singing to her, and the chorus says, allow me to introduce myself again. And then there's a new perspective on what that great I am is. So if you know it, sing it. If you don't know it, do whatever the heck you want. It's quiet in this house upon a hill. You won't mind it. Some things you can't know till you're still in the silence, where your spinning thoughts slow down in the stillness. Things have a way of working out. Allow me to introduce myself again. I'm the one that knew you before time began. I've been waiting for you to let me be your friend. And everything you ever need is everything I am. I am. I am. I am. Take your chances. There's nothing here to lose. Ask your questions. I promise you the truth as you're ready. I wanna hear your heart. Is it heavy? What wounds have left a mark? Allow me to introduce myself again. I was with you every place you've ever been. I'm the one that held you when you couldn't stand. If you're wondering who can heal your brokenness, I can. Well, I can. I will meet you in the house upon the hill. How I want to show you that I am real. Allow me to introduce myself again. I'm the love you used to think could not exist, but I'm as sure as where you're standing and as free as the wind. You don't have to reach for me, 'cause this is where I am. I am. I am. I am. Cool.
I'm going to do this for now. We take up offerings, so let me do that real quick and get that over with. And you're watching online, please give. That's really helpful for us, just to keep renting this room, this space weekly. So if you can, during this time, put donations in those little jars. That's super helpful for us. Here's what I want to do. Jason, can you play just like, oh, you already have your guitar. Never mind.
I'll play whatever you want.
Can you play like a little bit of that song again? That was freaking, how many of you have heard that before? I've never heard that song before. Oh, can you play that while you?
Yeah.
No,
I'll
never
play
mind.
on here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you do that. Here's what I want you guys to do. Grab your little thingies here, and I want to make sure everyone has one. I want you just to grab them and then show me that you have them. Choose a color, any color, whichever one works for you. There's extras. So here's what I want to do with this. So you have a neat little twisty tie here. You can kind of undo that. But what you see in this little baggie, and actually you don't even have to undo it if you don't want to, because it looks so pretty the way it is. But you're going to notice you have a little pot with a little plant. And some of you got watermelons, some of you got strawberries, some of you got tomato. And if you don't like what you got, there's many options around here. You can just pick and choose and trade. Some of you got like flowers for the bees. You're going to save the bees. Here's what I thought would be really beautiful for us to do as a community. There's soil inside of this little pot, right? And this soil, for this soil to be really fertile, nutrient dense, certain things had to die in order to be part of that soil, right? In order for this plant to grow and be healthy, certain things needed to die, certain things needed to end, so that the new seedling that's inside of this little pot grows well. And so I want you just to close your eyes for a moment. I want you to think about your own life, because you've been living this life where certain things have died, certain things have ended. But there's the seed, right? There's the seed that wants to be planted in that fertile soil. You've been walking on this soil. It's fertile. It's ready. Will you allow the thing to be planted? Will you allow it to grow? Some of you have experienced some broken relationships, and maybe it's time to let that thing go and just start walking fully into the new. Some of you had some shifts in relationships, some shifts, and it's been a little awkward, a little confusing. But right now, maybe the message for you is, I'm just going to embrace the new thing. However the new relationship looks, however the new twist looks, I'm going to walk in it fully and embrace it. Maybe it's just you learning to be you in this new reality of, I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. Maybe in this new season, you're able to say, I'm going to embrace that part of me now that's kind of popped out of the surface. I'm going to let this soil do what it does. I'm going to let the water and the nutrients to feed it and to keep growing into the person I knew I would someday be, knowing that there will be more shifts and more changes later. For some of us, maybe our picture of God has shifted and changed, and there's certain things we keep holding on to that maybe have not been so helpful for our journey. And so maybe right now saying, I'm going to allow that picture, I'm going to allow that picture to be buried, and I'm going to let the new one unfold, the new one grow into something even bigger, better, more fruitful. Today, I'm going to let that thing happen today, and I'm going to keep feeding it. I'm going to keep growing and watching the thing expand. Today, what is the thing that you want to essentially let be buried and grow? What is the new thing you're going to walk into today? So you can open your eyes. This is going to be your symbol for the next couple months. That picture, that thing that you thought about, you're going to be watering this plant for the next couple months. And as you do, I want you to remember that thing is this plant. I want you to picture it. And so as you feed it, as you give it water, I want you just to think throughout the next couple months, this is the new me unfolding. This is what it looks like when I'm able to let that soil, that nutrient-dense, fertile soil grow. This is what it looks like. This is what the new me looks like when it starts to grow, when it's allowed to grow. Yeah? Beautiful. All right, Jason, can you sing a couple more songs for us? Oh, that last song was so good.
It's cool, right?
I've never heard it. Never heard it.
The song like made me cry last week, man.
Yeah, I was
I
getting a little
never
emotional. I never cry.
So I talked a little bit about like mental health, meditation, stuff like that, perspective on God. I go through so many different like shape-shifting moments in my faith, philosophy, perspective. But there's a saying in biblical scripture that I always come back to that brings me to absolute peace and stillness. And it really paints like a really nice picture of springtime, Easter time. Psalm 23, right? The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. Right? So that idea of like still waters, that our minds would feel like we can close our eyes and be taken to that place of stillness, and that our souls could be restored. Whether that's through a theistic perspective or, you know, a purely meditative one, the hope is that we would all experience that new life through a healing idea. So this song is sort of a modern take on a 3,000-year-old poem. God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, by quiet streams. Even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, well, I will not fear, for you are with me, you're always with me. The shepherd's staff, it comforts me. You are my feast in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, follow me. In the house of God forever. God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, by quiet streams. And even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, for you are with me, you're always with me. The the shepherd's staff, it comforts me. You are my feast in the presence of enemies. With surely goodness will follow me, follow me, in the house of God forever. Cool. This last song is by that same chick that ordered the mattress off Amazon. She has such a beautiful heart. It's crazy. Like I hear a lot of like modern worship music, and I check out so quickly. It's like so much formula and cliche. And then I hear her, and it's just like a human heart, like singing. I'm like, okay, I like this. The song's called Extravagant. And this is one of those songs that, you know, we all come with different perspectives, and so feel free to interpret it in a way that brings peace to your heart. Like there's a line that says, singing about Jesus, you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. For those of you who have that traditional theology of atonement, you know, that could mean one thing. For those of you who have an idea of a different perspective on the cross, you know, that idea of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders is Jesus going and standing up for what was right, and he had to carry the heaviest freaking chunk of whatever. Let's sing it together. You were a lover before time's beginning. You gave your love freely, withholding nothing. Jesus, my Jesus, you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. You stopped at nothing to prove you were for us. Jesus, my Jesus. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us. You don't belittle our pain and our suffering. You comfort us in our greatest unraveling. Jesus, my Jesus. You are the dawn that is breaking within me. You are the sun that is rising around me. Jesus, my Jesus. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us. So there's that line in there that says, it's extravagant, it doesn't make sense. I resonate so much with that second line so often. Like, gosh, theology and all this philosophizing about the nature of the divine is so mysterious and inconclusive, and it drives me crazy, right? But sometimes I think back to the passage where Jesus says, unless you come to God, like a child, you might not be able to experience him. Because I think that God is meant to be more experienced and less understood. Right? So I'm happy that we get to experience that today. A little bit of that divinity colliding with our humanity. Here is all my love. It's yours, no conditions when you hold me close. No, I won't resist this. Here is all my love. It's yours, no conditions when you pull me close. No, I won't resist this. No, I won't resist this. Here is all my love. It's yours, no conditions when you pull me close. No, I won't resist this. Here is all my love. It's yours, no conditions when you pull me close. No, I won't resist this. No, I won't resist this. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us. So when I used to think back to Easter, verses like John 3:16 would like resonate in my mind, like for God so loved the world, hold it up at a baseball game, that verse. And then I read 1 John 3:16 by accident, and I was like, wait, that's the better John 3:16. Does anybody know what it says? I think Tony does. It says, by this we know, by this we know what love is. Jesus laid down his life, and we ought to lay down our life for others. It's like, okay, all right, I'm down for that. Because whether or not you believe that there was some big cosmic exchange of sin and forgiveness, when God's son was killed on a piece of wood, or whether you believe that it was this consequence of Jesus standing up to like the corrupt powers of the time, there's something pretty epic about a willingness to carry that up to the top of a hill, and while you're being abused and tormented and insulted, that you say, God, forgive them. I don't know what they're doing. It's the most badass thing I've ever heard in my life. And so that 1 John 3:16 thing of Jesus laying down his life for what was right, and we ought to do that for each other. And that's an extravagant love that's really hard to wrap our minds around. But if we experience it, it starts to change us. And there's that newness that happens in our minds. Let's sing this one more time. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you'd go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us.
Close your eyes one more time. By this we know love, that he laid his life down for us, and we ought to lay our lives down for our brothers and sisters. How do we rebuild a temple? How do we experience new life again? The message is we extravagantly love one another. We love ourselves. We learn to walk in that. And when we do, the temple is rebuilt. Yeah? Awesome. We love you, everyone. And we will be at Miles Square Park in probably 45 minutes or so. And we're just going to hang out as a group and eat some food. And the kids are going to do Easter egg hunts. And we're just going to have fun together. So if you can join us, the other half of the group is there. So, yeah, we'd love to see you guys there. And I hope this was a meaningful Easter for you, Easter weekend. Yeah? Cool. All right, everyone. Love you. Give someone a hug next to you, and we'll see you next week.